Let's welcome in Keith Sanchez now of the Locked On Network. He's one of their draft experts. Keith is a 2019 national champion with the LSU Tigers. And Keith, before we get into the draft stuff, your story is fascinating. I was doing a little research this morning. I read an article The Athletic had written on you. In 2021, you were a player personnel assistant, I guess would be the position, with LSU. Then you went to law school to kind of figure out how you navigate the NIL world. And I'm just curious, have you graduated law school, and kind of what are you up to now in that step in the journey?
Yeah, so as soon as I left, that was a bit of a process, man. So I actually decided to go to grad school. I had a couple agencies reach out to me, and it was kind of like, hey, it would probably be more beneficial if you take the grad school route first, right? And then that way you can go ahead and get your agent's license. So I took that route. I'm graduating in a month. Finishing that process, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then, just navigating this NIL space, I kind of foreseen that it would be a lot of disruption, right? I think that a lot of people didn't foresee it, and I just knew, obviously working in recruiting, personnel, getting to know the families, the players, and I knew that basically the NCAA kind of just pulling off all of the safeguards, right, and all of the Band-Aids, that it was going to kind of turn into the Wild Wild West, and it has definitely done so.
Awesome. We're thrilled to have you on the show, Keith. Appreciate you making some time. Let's talk a little Browns and what they'll do in this month's NFL draft. They don't pick till 54, so it's impossible to kind of predict what's going to happen in the first 53 picks to know who the Browns will take at 54. But in your mind, if the draft were to play out perfectly for Cleveland, what route would you go if you were Andrew Berry with the 54th pick? A running back, a receiver, offensive tackle, defensive lineman? If all the cards fell right, what would be the ideal A-grade situation for the Browns at 54?
Yeah, I'm about to give a cliche answer, then I'm going to clean it up at the end. And I just simply go best player available. One, because I really feel like after evaluating this Cleveland Browns roster, they have one of the best rosters in the NFL from top to bottom. Secondly, we know that the NFL messes things up, right? And I'm going to count on the other 31 teams in the first round to mess it up. And then thirdly, I'm going to look at it and say, hey, this offensive tackle class is pretty deep. And I think they can find a really good offensive tackle sitting there at pick 54. So I look offensive tackle first, and then you might want to go wide receiver, but I also believe that this wide receiver core, honestly, is top 3, top 4 in the NFL, so they may not have to address that early. They can wait to the third round to get a wide receiver. So I'm going to sit back, watch how the board falls, trust my board, my evaluations, my scouting room, and probably go offensive tackle, wide receiver, and then we'll see how even these edge rushers, because we've seen guys like Jared Verse and Latu Latu for whatever reason now, and I think it's solely based on their 40 time, they're starting to fall. So even maybe an edge rusher like Chop Robinson out of Penn State would be a good complementary piece.
Keith, let's talk about the wide receiver position. Obviously, the Browns traded for Jerry Jeudy, but that doesn't mean that they're, out of the market. Obviously, Amari Cooper is on the last year of his deal. Elijah Moore is on the last year of his deal, and you don't know really what you got with Cedric Tillman and David Bell. So let's look at some of those wide receivers that could potentially fall to 54. Is there one that you like more than others that you think could come into the NFL and make a big-time splash play, make some plays for the Browns?
I like a lot of them, to answer your question.
A lot of people do.
Particular, I like a lot of them, man. And listen, man, if people are going to let Florida State wide receiver Keon Coleman fall due to production, right, and we know that his quarterback was injured and then they're looking at the 40 time, this is a grown man. Look, 6'3", 200-plus pound. And when you cut on the film, you just see that this guy is physically dominant, right? He reminds me somewhere in between a Brandon Marshall and the Dez Bryant, right? Just the physicality after run, their physical presence. And defensive backs, right? The first quarter, they okay. Second quarter, they okay. But once they get to the third and fourth quarter, it's like, man, I'm tired of tackling this big-bodied wide receiver. So I like him. I see the graphic. Xavier Legette is also another one of those guys that's a A.J. Brown comp for me. But if you're looking for a route run, and this is a guy that I just finished up his final evaluation, and that's flying under the radar, in my opinion, is Washington wide receiver Jalen McMillan. Obviously, I spent my time at LSU. I watched Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase every single day at practice, and just running in a slot. And I don't know if you guys remember, but when Justin Jefferson came out, right, because he played primarily slot, a lot of people questioned how fast he was. And then he got to the NFL Combine, ran a 4.4, and everybody said, okay, this guy has top-end speed. And I see some of the same things, not comparing him to Justin Jefferson one-to-one, but comparing him from the fact that he's a slot wide receiver with a big body and has speed. So I like Jalen McMillan as a route runner, definitely.
Keith, you broke my heart earlier when you said the Browns can wait to the third round to take a receiver because they've tried that in the past, and they cannot find receivers in the third round. We've proven that time and time again. If they wait to the third round, it's not going to go well. So I hope that they do go in the second round. I'm pro receiver in the second round. But since we already covered that, we'll pivot for a second. Tackle and guard both, I think, could be areas to look at. They got the fifth-year option on Jed Wilson that you're not really sure what you're going to do there. Right tackle is a little bit of a concern because it's DeJuan Jones' size, I think, and injuries could always be a problem. They've got two aging guards in the middle that are making about $34 million combined, Bitonio and Teller. Anywhere across that line really sort of makes sense. Is there guards or tackles you like at that spot?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. And honestly, I think this. I don't think, if you look at my board, probably 10 of my top 23 players are offensive linemen, but I don't think that the NFL teams are going to draft that way, right? So I believe that these offensive tackles or offensive linemen as a whole are going to drop. So you look at a guy like the Arizona offensive tackle, Jordan Morgan, right? I believe that he can be a plug-and-play player. But if you want to go down the board a little bit deeper, there's a Yale offensive tackle with 36-inch arms. He came in at 6'5", 300-plus pounds, had an impressive pro day. And then we're talking about developing the prospect. If you given 1 year of sitting on the sideline, sitting behind some veterans, this is a guy that I believe you can buy into the upside for sure. And just rounding it out, another UConn guy, Christian Haynes. He can play center. He can play guard. He's a very scrappy football player. Got a chance to talk to him at the Senior Bowl. And I always try to pull all these guys ready for the NFL, right? Just have that conversation with him from a mentality perspective, and he definitely had it. And to round that out with interior offensive lineman, one of my sleeper guys that I like a lot, Arkansas center Bo Limmer. He played all five positions, however you want to look at it, of the offensive line. He's one of those old school offensive linemen that I think are fitting great with the Cleveland Browns, and their mentality has the tape fingers right, bloody, getting after it. So I really like him, and I think he'll fit in right with this scheme.
Non-Browns question, but just a evaluation question, Keith. When you look at quarterbacks, the NFL over the last 20 years, frankly, isn't good at drafting quarterbacks. There's like a 40% success rate on first-round quarterbacks, whether or not they turn out to be any good or just out of the league in a couple of years. You've recruited quarterbacks out of high school and looked at different traits and abilities and the mental makeup. You're now doing it from the college level to the pros. What do you look at as some of the most important characteristics a quarterback can have that translates to success, from the collegiate level to the pro level?
Yeah, it's mental makeup. At this point, right, we're talking about first-round quarterbacks. All of them could throw the football, right? All of them could throw it 40 yards, 50 yards. We've seen the pro days from wearing helmets and getting chased around with brooms to, the Zach Wilsons, right, where they're throwing off one leg and launching it 60 yards. So we've seen so many different variations of quote-unquote arm talent. But if you ask me what really makes a quarterback is their ability to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a situation where you're going to a really good spot, right, where they have a good offensive line and a good wide receiver core, and the defense can kind of help you out, and you have good coaching, on both sides of the football. So I look at those guys, your ability to just deal with adverse situations, and I think that's why it's so important, as us as talent evaluators, even though we may not get these one-on-one conversations, pay attention to the interviews, pay attention to the tidbits, and be like, you know what, ask yourself a simple question, like, would I go to war with this guy? And I think that usually guides and dictates, how this quarterback may fare in the NFL.
All right, Keith, you went to LSU, I went to OSU, so we got to put our differences aside here. You've been studying these wide receivers, and the hottest topic is Malik Nabers or Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, you know how I feel, I know how you feel, but let's call a spade a spade. Who's wide receiver one in this draft?
Yeah, so first of all, I have to give a shout out to the real wide receiver, LSU.
Whoa, hey, don't do that. You can't even say that with a straight face right now. Don't do that.
You guys are both national champions, so I guess there is at least a little bit of common ground between you guys.
Yeah, definitely. It's respect across the board. It's definitely respect. Would you ask who is wide receiver one for me? That was the question?
Yes, sir.
I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. And you know this, right? Having played the sport and everything. Sometimes when it comes to drafting, it's just about the floor, right? Everybody looks at upside and big plays and things like that. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is a complete wide receiver, 6'3", 6'4", can run routes, right? He's consistently bracketed. He understands how to beat double teams already, right? And he hasn't even entered into the NFL. Contested catch ability, IQ, ability to adjust to the football. There's nothing that he can't do. Now, there's no knock on Malik Nabers. I think Malik Nabers can step right in and be an explosive option, right? I think whoever has the better rookie year will be dependent on the situation that they go to, because I went to the pro day and I recruited Malik Nabers, but I wasn't there during his career. And I was able to watch him, now that he's been in the LSU program from 3 years, and I'm standing on the sideline at pro day, and I sat there and said, he's one of those ones, right? And we're talking about the Odell Beckhams, the Jarvis Landrys, the Jamar Chases, the Justin Jefferson. And we know this because we get caught up and enamored with 40 time, right? Straight line speed. But what really catches defensive backs off guard, right, is the start-stop ability, right? The ability to change direction, the ability to tempo routes. And Malik Nabers has all of that. So I want to say it's a 1A and 1B, but if you ask me, like, let's say if I'm the Cardinals sitting at pick number 4, I'm rolling with Marvin Harrison Jr. because I think he can play on the outside and play on the inside and flat out get it done. I'm buying into the pedigree, right? Him being Marvin Harrison Jr.'s son and what he's proven to me already thus far in his college career.
Go Bucks.
Well done. That's the right answer.
Come on, man.
I'm not even an Ohio State fan. Like I'm totally unbiased in this, but I mean Marvin Harrison Jr. to me might be the best college football receiver we've seen come out, and I can't since Randy Moss. Like, seriously, I think he's that good. Am I crazy?
I mean, we just talked about the LSU thing, man, so obviously I'm a little biased. But I agree, man. I agree. I think if you look at it in totality, yes, just buying into a complete prospect. And with the draft process, sometimes it's just simply about knowing what you're getting. I can envision Marvin Harrison Jr. playing in the NFL because I know exactly what I'm getting out of him. Yeah. He just reminds me of the 6'3", 6'4" version of Devontae Adams, to be completely honest. And that means he's top 5 wide receiver potentially in the NFL.
I want to ask you about the quarterbacks. J.J. McCarthy seems to divide a lot of people on whether or not he's any good in the NFL. I wonder where you fall on that, and just in general, what quarterbacks do you like in this draft?
Yeah, the J.J. McCarthy conversation has taken off, right? And over at the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, I talked about him probably in January, and I said this is a guy that I believe his draft stock will elevate. And I was talking about into the first round, potentially top 20, but then now people saying that he can be the second best quarterback. I'm one of those people that when it comes down to evaluating, and that's not just quarterback, but any position, it's like I have to see you do it in college first, right, before I can elevate you over some of these other guys. I think J.J. McCarthy can be a really good quarterback. He has the arm talent. You watch that game against Michigan State. He made all of the throws, off-platform throws. They went empty, right? I think part of the context around J.J. McCarthy is the fact that Michigan didn't use him at all. They ran the ball, 30 times against Penn State in the second half, which is crazy to even think about. So I think that's part of the issue with J.J. McCarthy. But I do like him, and if he goes to the right spot, I think he will be a really good NFL quarterback.
Keith, we'll get you out of here on this, but your national champion 2019 with LSU. Coach O was the head coach of that team, and he's quite the character. So I was just curious if you had a Coach O story you might be able to share with us before we let you go today.
Oh man, I don't think I have one, man. I'm going to keep those in the holster, man. I'm going to keep those in the holster, keep those in the locker room.
Fair enough. That is Keith Sanchez.
But I will do this. I will give y'all a Go Tigers. I'll give you a Go Tigers.
Awesome. Keith, we appreciate you joining us. Make sure you check out Keith Sanchez on the Locked On NFL Draft Show and the NFL Draft Network. Keith, appreciate you coming on, and best of luck in the future, man.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.